So before we get started, I just wanted to recognize both Alpha Sigma Tau and Alpha Sigma Alpha who have packed the space tonight. So thank you so much for being here and being a great program partner. I really do value the connections you have with this office and your willingness to engage in professional development. So just a little bit about me. I want to start up this presentation by introducing myself. I am Bennett Nestle. I work at IEP's Career and Professional Development Center, and I'm very thrilled to be talking about the idea of personal brand, because this is kind of a full circle moment for me. I, early on in my career, was in personal publicity. I worked in public relations. I was working mainly with film, music, and TV clients. And pretty much all of my day was really being concerned with their image, with their brand. And coming here and working in higher education, especially in career development, I realized that it's not just the celebrities who have the brand, it's not just your companies, but every single person in this room, like it or not, or even if you know it or not, you have a brand. Today, I'm hoping that through talking about different talking about personal branding, you're going to be able to figure out what that brand is and maybe how you can actively craft it, just so that you can showcase the kind of professional person you can be and offer to great employers like Natalie at Enterprise. So we see this screen and everybody here immediately has recognition with pretty much every company up here. We look at McDonald's, we understand their values. We understand the associations. It's convenient. It's nostalgic. It reminds you of childhood. We look at Apple. It's simple. It's creative. You also have these associations with people. And again, I just wanted to point out that the more conscious you are with it, the more control you are going to have with your narrative. So throughout this presentation, we're going to ask what our narrative is. Because one brand up here, you might see a little bit differently than the others. One kind of seems a little off compared to the others. You can shout it out. If you don't know what it is, it's definitely Quibi. Raise your hand if you have any associations or thoughts with this company. Nobody stands up. Let me try this with another one. McDonald's. Do you know what McDonald's is and you understand what their brand is? I see head nods across the crowd. Quibi was a media company that had $1.7 billion funneled into its investments. But not a single person here understands what they are about. So, they needed to take a little bit more time to share what their company is about, what the streaming can do for you. Because the associations in at the time, and I can tell you that because that's when I was working in PR, was that Quibi was sort of just like TikTok. Quick, easy, digestible things to consume. But in reality, Quibi had 13 Emmy nominations and 2 Emmy wins. They should have been synonymous with professionalism and quality content. As a result of not being in the correct, or not even showcasing their correct band, Quibi was defunct within about 4 months of their launch. We don't want this to happen to you. So, today I'm going to be talking about your personal brand. Because just like Quibi, people have associations with you. So I'm going to share my definition of personal branding. And that is an individual's unconsciously or consciously cultivated image which reflects the associations others have with their abilities, beliefs, and personal attributes. Now, I could say that right now, and it's going to make a whole lot of sense when we get to the end of this presentation. But what I think is more important when it comes to branding is learning what it is not, or rather relearning, because branding needs rebranding. When you hear that, it's synonymous with maybe being self-aggrandizing. It's about, it's inauthentic. It's all these negative things people think about when they think about your brand. People don't have brands, corporations have brands. I am going to challenge that throughout this presentation by offering some myths and misconceptions and how we can think about it differently. So for the first one, we're going to be talking about branding is boasting. And everyone here is good people. We want to be seen as humble. We want to be seen as not being a braggart. So one thing I want to kind of change your perception on is you selling yourself isn't boasting. It's educating. Think about branding as educating people about what skills and what makes you unique and what you have to offer. And that really kind of cuts against one of the biggest things that we're told. Has anybody here heard of put your head down, do hard work, and amazing things will happen? That is one of my least favorite quote-unquote truisms. Because when you do that, people aren't seeing you. You need to make yourself known. You need to make yourself seen. Because if you're not, you're giving a disservice to those around you. And I say this because while you're working on a team, while you are interacting with the community around you, they don't know what you have to offer until you tell them. And it's very similar about making your goals known. A lot of people complain, I'm working so hard and I'm never getting that promotion. And they don't realize that to get that promotion, the person above you or the person that can grant you that first has to understand what you want. What are your goals? And to understand that, they have to understand what you are capital A about. Okay, so going on with that idea, what you really need to know is your audience and understand what they need. So sharing yourself is very much understanding what makes you important in the roles you're looking for. So if you think about your audience, that could be your peers, that could be a potential employer, that could be people in your industry. They need something. There is a problem that needs to be filled. And you have to figure out what in you can fill that need. What is your point of differentiation that can address the specific problem? So I have a quick scenario here. Let's say that you are on a team with really hands-on workers. These could be a bunch of artists, but they're stuck all day doing emails. Emails are super repetitive. There's all these tasks. A person could come in and see that everybody here is a creative person, but they're not great with systems of organization. So let's say that person is knowledgeable of Microsoft Power Automate, which, quick plug to that tool, if you're not using it, look into it because there's so many repetitive tasks that we do each day that can be automated with software that is free to use as a student. That's my shameless plug number one. But in this scenario, if you're a person that knows you have that tool, you can be absolutely doing great in your job, and you are doing handling those repetitive tasks because you have that skill. You are not servicing your brand if you're keeping that information to yourself. It is not boasting to say, I know how to use technology, because could be an education tool, not just to say that this is a person we can go to help with these tasks, but it could also be a person that can educate on these things. And this is very similar, and honestly, this is something that I think everybody here needs to think about as somebody who is younger, entering an industry. You're going to be with a lot of people who have a lot of expertise. You have to think, well, with all of those years of experience, what can I bring to it? And sometimes that answer is your perspective as a young person, your perspective maybe in technology, even though it is a fallacy to say that all young people know technology. But it's just something to think about, what you have to offer. And that could be very important if you are trying to get into an industry that isn't completely obvious from the start. Sometimes it's easy. In my undergrad, I majored in public relations, and I got a job in public relations. That's pretty 1 to 2, or 1 to 1. So my brother's story is a little bit more interesting. He was working as a theater artist for a very long time. He was in New York doing a bunch of things. In 2020, if you don't already already know this, everything got shut down. His livelihood was completely decimated by the COVID pandemic. And what he did is he decided to reframe what he had to offer. And he now works in public health. He is currently working in an office that offers assistance to people with traumatic brain injuries and getting them resources. You might be thinking that has absolutely nothing to do with his life before, but he made that work for him. Through this, they had a need. They have these reports that they have to create to address grant funding for these things. They get all this money in, and they have to justify getting that money. Now, every bit of his workers, they could be branded as calculators. They know numbers. They are numbers people. But that wasn't working. They weren't getting the reactions they needed from that scenario. So, he comes in as a theater artist and understands storytelling. He understands how to highlight the problem and say how they were able to address those things. And as a result, they got much better relationship building to their funders. And one thing I wanted to point out in this is that it is very succinct. I put on here storyteller. There is about 1 million things to say about my brother, and I know because I lived with him for like 16, 17 years of my life. But to distill it to one thing, you think that's doing a disservice to you, right? Absolutely not. Because what it is doing is positioning yourself. It is very difficult to communicate your value, so you need to figure out how you can distill that into easy categories, because people understand categories. Now you might be thinking, you were talking about the importance of having a point of differentiation. What makes you special? What stands you out in the crowd? Everyone here has not yet graduated from college, and you're like, I don't have that yet. Don't worry. Because branding isn't something that just exists. It is an active process. You craft your brand over a whole entire profession. So, to do that, you have to engage in professional development. And a lot of that professional development is done for you. You're attending classes, you are learning about your major, you're doing, well, hopefully you're going to internships and doing all those things. A lot of this is self-reflection work, is putting the work in for yourself. How many people here follow people's blogs on the internet for your industry? Does anybody read any news sources based on what's going on? I know you're attending workshops because you're right here, right now. So you're actively helping yourself position yourself with new skills. But engaging in these really positive professional development behaviors will allow you to know your industry better. And the better you know the industry, the better you know what they need. Think back to your audience and what the problem is you need to solve. Okay. So, I was talking a lot about me. What are we thinking about? How we want to position ourselves? What categories we want to put ourselves into? But that brings me to the second myth and misconception, and that is that your personal brand is about me. Your personal brand is about what others think of you, because it's about their associations. We can have all these ideas about ourselves, but it doesn't matter in leveraging your brand if other people aren't seeing that as well. And we see this, Forbes conducted this really interesting study where people wrote down things about their brand, qualities they think they had, things that were that kind of typified them. And they found that 75% of people thought they had a fantastic personal brand, that they cultivated something really unique. And only 15% of those people had other people identify those same qualities in them. That's a gigantic disconnect. And when they think that they had a personal brand, what they really had was a belief system. They had a philosophy about themselves. So before you do that, you have to understand what people are thinking about you. And I think about that in the world of psychology. A lot of times, you can have two different people see completely different things from the same image, from the same person. So in this photo, what do we see here? Anyone just shout it out. What do you see? You see an old lady? Does anyone else see anything different? You see a young lady. Those are, well, not polar opposites, but very, very different things. Actually, you know what? Let's get a poll of the room. Raise your hand if in this photo you can see an old lady. Oh my gosh. Now raise your hand if you are seeing a young woman. We're split. This painting is having a branding. This painting is having a branding crisis because what this painting wants to be perceived as, the young woman, only half of you are seeing her as that. So for the rest of you, I'm going to point out what you're seeing. Follow this trace. You can see a young woman turning her head. You can see that is a cheek. Now for everybody else, you might be thinking, what am I looking at? They're looking at this. That is the old woman that they are seeing. So it's the same. All right. I know. Mind blowing. Mind blowing. Okay. So, if we want to be seen as the young woman, we first need to figure out what other people are seeing to readdress that and reframe it. So in this photo, we are seeing a nose, we're seeing a mouth, and we're seeing an eye. We need to figure out how we can tell people that's not a mouth. That is a necklace. That's not a nose, that is my chin. And that is not an ear. That is not an eye, that is an ear. And this applies to how you want to be perceived as well. But before you need, excuse me, didn't say that tech was part of my brand. Okay. So before you do that, you have to figure out what other people are seeing in your personal brand. And one way to do that is trust your inner circle. Trust the people around you. Because we have mentors, we have friends, we have all these people. And they have an idea about who they see you as. And before you go out in public saying that this is your brand, you want to make sure that other people are seeing it as well. So there are people in this room I absolutely trust. Kelsey Thompson is my supervisor. She's back there. I can have a conversation with her, and I'm not going to be offended in what she sees in me. So this can be done in two different ways. This can be an informal conversation, something that you can just talk freely. Other people take it a step further. They can use the technology. We have Microsoft Forms, we have Google Forms, any of those things to keep it anonymous. You can send that out to your network, to the people that you truly trust. And in that, you want to identify very specific things. What do people think about your core values? And this is really important because one of the best bits when it comes to securing a job is making sure that your mission aligns with their mission. Do I match, or do I show what I intend to match with them? Your strengths and your weaknesses. You might have a really great idea. You spent a summer in high school learning how to code. And you could say, that's part of my personal brand. I am a coder. If other people haven't seen that, if that's not in like your LinkedIn, if that's not, you're not showing projects, that might be a strength that you have personally, but that is not a strength that you have shown to the world. Unique attributes is, I think, a really important question to have with people. Asking, what do you see that's about me that's different than the other people that you've worked with? And that's where we can start identifying the point of differentiation that I talked about earlier. That's where we can see, oh, I can make sure that this unique quality is highlighted in everything I do to address those problems that other people have. Personality and leadership are pretty self-explanatory, but I'm going to go to my favorite, and this is abstract symbols. So, just as I'm saying everyone here has a brand, celebrities have a brand, companies have a brand, symbols themselves have associations with them. A clock, synonymous with time, right? So if you ask somebody, and this is an exercise I really encourage everyone to do here, what object or animal or just abstract theme they associate you with, you can start understanding a little bit more truly about what they're seeing you as. Because sometimes when you're talking really specific, like, what do you think my core values are, they're going to tell you what you want to hear. But when you say what your symbol is, they're going to have a little more heart with it, and it tells you a lot about yourself. But it requires a bit of decoding on your part. I recently did this, and these are some answers that popped up. I was really surprised. An arrow popped up twice in one day from two separate people without talking to each other. And I was like, well, what does that say about me? That's the most thing that's coming up. It could say that I'm focused, that I'm very precise in my work, but I have to kind of pull back. We can get the results and we can be really happy with them, frame them as a great thing, but if we want to do the work, we also want to compare it with our goals. What is your goal of your brand? And part of my branding really does want to be relationship building. I want to be a warm person. So if arrow is something that's coming up over and over again, that can often be maybe piercing. And that is maybe something that I need to work on. I need to, not necessarily saying I don't have that great relationship building, I just want to make sure that other people know that I'm the person that they can come to. Highly recommend anybody in this room engage in that, because you'll be shocked with the answers. I can't believe I got two of the same symbol back to back. Okay, so we go on to the myth and misconception number 3. Having a large network is enough to leverage my personal brand. So, though it's true, it's great to have a lot of connections to pull from. You can pull from your LinkedIn crew. But if you have 1,000 people that you don't talk to, but who know you, that's not quite as important as having people who can be your advocates and who can carry your message. So, I want you to start thinking about how your sphere of influence or your ecosystem of your brand works. And one thing I want to have you think about is first your inner circle. Those are your peers. Those are your colleagues. Once you start, once you go into an industry, they can be different people. If you're, they're different people to me, depending on what my goals are. So my inner circle for public relations looks a whole lot different than it does for higher education. But what is constant through that is they're my people that know about the industry and I can bounce my ideas off of. If there's something that I want to relate, maybe it's a blog post, maybe it is part of my elevator pitch, I want to make sure that I pilot this or I test this with a small audience before I bring it out to the whole world. And that really does bring us back to the idea of education. When you're talking with your inner circle, these are your influencers. You're teaching them what your brand is, and it's hard to get across those brands. So if you have a team of people that understands it very intimately because you talk with them often, you've tested things out, you've gotten their inputs, they're the people that other people are going to reach out to get. So it sort of kind of goes in two different directions. You educate your influencers on the inner circle, and they bring it out to your organization. And your organization can spread it to the external world, to everything outside of things. However, when people are trying to learn about you and learn about your brand, they're not going to you specifically. They're not going to come up to Bennett and say, Bennett, well, maybe sometimes they'll say, what are you about? But if they want an honest assessment, they want to see what your reputation is, they're going in the opposite direction. They're coming from the outside world, going to your organization, and going into the inner circle. So you want to make sure that your branding is strong with your peers because they are going to be your educators. And you might be looking at this GIF that's been playing. Huge Stranger Things fan, by the way. But we see this trope in media all the time. We have people having montages where they're trying on different clothes, they're trying on a different look. That could be the same as your personal brand if you want to maybe reposition yourself. And in this, you need a trusted friend. 11th year needs Max to be able to feel more like herself. And I think this is great. At one point, you'll see they'll adjust things, they'll look at it, it's not right, you can see the eyes. They're helping them figure that out. So your peers and your social influencers aren't just the people who are educating, they're also the people that are helping craft that for you. And it's so much easier than going alone. So, after the pilot, after you're testing it out with all of your influencers, it's important to put it out there. And that's one thing that I think a lot of people struggle with. Because again, they don't want to feel like they're boasting, but it's to be consistent and it's to be engaging with it over time. So I want to point out specifically LinkedIn, because a lot of times when we think about delivering your personal brand, we think the digital space, and that's absolutely right, because the digital space is a fantastic place to do it. But I also want to show you some of the benefits of this. It lets you curate your image in a way that you can't in the physical world. If I want to share myself as a communicator, I put that right into that headline. Because if somebody's looking through my page, they're seeing exactly what I want them to see. Beyond this, one thing I wanted to share about LinkedIn and similar sites, these are for-profit models. This is a great use for us, but the goal of LinkedIn is different than the goal that I have personally. But you can take advantage of it. LinkedIn's goal is for you to engage with it as much as possible. And that's the same as every tech company. And because that's the case, if you're engaging with the platform, it's going to reward you. So if you're finding that weekly search and you say, man, only 2 people found my profile this week, ask yourself, how much time have you really spent on the platform? Because the more conversations you have, the more you like other people's posts, the more you share it. Not only you're doing the work of educating what's important to you and cultivating relationships that's important for branding, the platform is seeing you as an active user, somebody's engaged, and they're going to send more people to your profile. So that is one thing I just wanted to kind of put out there. However, I spent a bit of time on LinkedIn, but I also want to share with you that LinkedIn is not the only source for showcasing your professional self. A lot of times people will hesitate to say going on Facebook or Twitter. There's a real power in Facebook and Twitter, and a lot of professionals have been honing it specifically on Twitter because it's microblogging. It's something that you can share yourself over time, and cultivating this can make sure that other people are seeing that you are active and interested in your specific profession. So that's just a word on Twitter. I'm not sure what the future of Twitter looks like now that it's been bought, but as of right now, professional Twitter is absolutely thriving. So, a word about networking. You want to be able to utilize your personal brand because networking gives you access to the hidden job markets. I found this article from Business Insider that listed a study that said 70% of jobs are not listed online. And that is terrible news for people who think that job searching is just finding different job posts and sending them out. because right now you are only available to 30% of what people are actually hiring. So, to network. Biggest mistake I see people do when they are networking is thinking it's a one-way relationship. You can have a mentor, you can have somebody that typically helps you. Maybe they got you an internship at one point. That relationship is not an opportunity for you to take advantage of someone or use them as a resource. They're not a resource. You have a relationship. So you want to reach out often, not just for favors. If the only time you're reaching out to a connection is when you need something from them, they're going to associate you with feeling like they are going to have to work. And that's not the relationship that you want to cultivate. So make sure that you're giving them life updates. Maybe you have conversations about things in your industry. Keep that contact. And more than that, close the loop. There are so many people that have given me great favors. Earlier today I said I started my early career in public relations. That would never have been able to happen if I weren't able to utilize my college's alumni collective connections. But here's the thing. When I got that job, I don't think I would have ever been able to utilize that same connection again if I didn't tell them what the outcome was. They went out on a ledge to talk to a friend and ask that I get an interview with that company. If somebody's doing you a favor, you want to give them closure. Because closure is super important to people, and it's a great way to just check in and thank them. And not just thank them with updating them with the results of what happened, but you're also, please, and honestly, everyone here should really listen to me on this one. I know a lot of this is crafting the personal brand you want to craft and make sure others have the perceptions of you that you want them to have. But one thing that should be in every single person's brand here is being courteous. And one thing that is kind of a dying art is sending thank you cards. So if somebody is doing you a favor, it is nice to thank them on email. It is more impactful to send them something handwritten. And in general, if you continue these communication, not just with your inner circle, but with people that have given you favors, you can eventually bring them into your inner circle, and you can develop a two-way relationship where it's not just one person giving everything to one person. Okay, so back to the myths and misconceptions, and I just wanted to touch on this really quickly because it's very important to me. A lot of times people think branding is just cosmetics. Up until this point, yes, I talked about selling yourself, but a lot of it was about developing kind of that content, the stuff that you have to offer to make it available in your brand. But there's nothing wrong with cosmetics. And the one thing, I wanted to share you a quick story about why I think clothes are absolutely so important. So as I talked about before, I was working in a talent publicity firm in New York. It was called Persona PR, and I was super happy. I was just turned 22. I was going into New York City for the first time because I was commuting for the first month of that job. Biggest mistake ever, but when I was there, I thought I was going to be the most professional person ever. I got this suit, it was super nice, and I got there and no one was wearing suits. I was absolutely uncomfortable in my skin. And comfortability is so important to me doing good work. Because that first day, yes, I was able to do my job, I was able to fulfill the functions that I was expected to fulfill, but I did not feel like I was a part of that ecosystem. So, I had to figure out the culture. And that is part of branding, figuring out what is expected of you in a specific industry. That suit and tie that I thought looked so great would have looked really great in the financial district, but I wasn't working in the financial district. If we look at that Google Maps, I was a 59-minute walk away. I was on 401 Park Avenue. So if I walked an hour, I would have been comfortable. But where I was, absolutely not. Shout out to Express, which I dropped way too much money on the next day to fit in with the office. Okay. The last misconception I wanted to tackle today was the idea of fake it until you make it. That's something you hear all the time, and sometimes it's true. When it comes to confidence, faking it till you make it is great because you have something that you actually can do, and if you feel like you're faking it till you make it, it's actually not faking it until you make it, you're doing it the whole time. What I'm talking about when I refer to fake it until you make it, is saying things about yourself or integrating things that you wish to be true that just certainly aren't at this point. So, there's this great quote from, I'm blanking on her first name, but her last name is Clark, and she wrote a fantastic book called Reinventing You. And one of the last chapters talked about the limits to reinvention. We talked a lot about positioning, but you can't position something that you don't have. And Clark says something that I think is absolutely true, that the worst thing that you can be in a society is phony. We don't like phonies because relationships, professional or otherwise, are built on trust. And if you can't deliver on that, you should not try to position that as part of your professional brand. And you know I love pop culture, so I'm going to bring something into pop culture. You have to ask, can I deliver on my personal brand? And I'm going to compare rock stars and pop princesses. And this is a story, I've learned that a lot of the CPDC student workers aren't aware of when Ariana Grande licked a donut. Does everybody remember that? Okay, I see some hands up. Does other people not remember that? Okay, for those who don't remember this, it was the biggest deal in the entire world. The 24 hours news cycle, which we could be talking about war, finances, all these things that I don't know that much about, they were talking about Ariana Grande instead. So what had happened was Ariana Grande went to this local donut shop where she licked a donut, which is gross and definitely not courteous to other members. She put it back on the shelf. It was not a great look for her. But it was especially not a great look for her because at this time, Ariana Grande is not the person we see today. She has very successfully rebranded herself. Back then, she was bubblegum. She came right off of Nickelodeon. She was a child star, and her pop songs were very kind of bubbly. So the world had a meltdown because there's a disconnect. People who are pop princesses, people who are kind and sweet and child stars, shouldn't be engaging in reckless behavior. They shouldn't be destroying property, and they should not be licking donuts and putting it back on the shelf. I'm going to share you another video that garnered absolutely no controversies at the time. You can see the New York Post said Ariana Grande's donut disaster, infantile celebrity syndrome. This is Keith Richards and Keith Moon of the Rolling Stones and The Who. They are at a hotel, and they have a TV from that hotel. See this balcony? You know what they're going to do with it? They threw it right off the balcony. That might be a little bit more than a donut being licked. But what's important here is no one cared because they're rock stars. We don't expect rock stars to have those kind of, we expect rock stars to have those kind of behaviors. So the point is here, you have to ask yourself, can I deliver on my personal brand? The brand that Ariana Grande had in 2015 is not something she could sustain. So I'm going to move into our final takeaways. Branding is education, and it requires self-reflection. Now, if you think about earlier in the presentation, I talked about you reaching out to your network to learn what they think about you. That's just the start of it. Once you get that information, the work comes to you, and a lot of this is about reflecting on things and reflecting why they thought about that about you and starting to learn things about yourself. So not only are you educating your influencers, you are educating the entire world around you, professional or otherwise, kind of educating yourself. So personal branding, far from being shallow, is kind of a really great tool and a process that allows us to understand ourselves better. That being said, your personal brand, again, is not about you. It is about others' perceptions of you, so make sure you are always aware of that. And the last thing is professional branding is an active process and is something that does not stop at college. It doesn't stop at your first job. It is something that you engage in throughout your whole career. And your personal branding can shift over time. Again, we want those categories. We want to put ourselves into those categories so we're known for those things. It does not mean that that's all you have to offer or that's all you're about, but it's thinking what is relevant. And through this process, you're going to be able to build relationships both with your peers and your mentors. Thank you so much for listening in.